Welcome back to week 4 of the Anchor Lake podcast. I'm your host, Griffin Gushman, joined by my co-hosts,
Peter Mag,
Jaden Wyatt,
Josh Hernandez.
All right, so we're going to jump right in here into a bunch of great Division III action here. A lot of suiting up across the country this week. Meets like the DIII Shootout, Emory Invitational. We got a lot of fast times come at you this week.
Yeah, we wouldn't be a D3 podcast if we didn't start with the D3 Shootout. Let's be honest. I would say that this meet is a great encapsulation of what it means to be a D3 swimmer. What do you say, gentlemen?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I really love the unique format, how you need to build a roster very strategically. You know, we could only send 2 swimmers per event. There's 2 flights for each event. And so, you know, you run into a lot of unique circumstances. I know, at least in one event, one of the swimmers who was relegated to the B flight ended up winning the overall event. So, you know, she could only get as many points as were available for 9th place, but would have won the event had she been sent to the A flight. So there's a lot of strategic placing of your swimmers here, making sure to bring a roster that really has a lot of depth and can fill out the events while also making sure that you put your swimmers in the right slot. So it's a great game of strategy, and it was really entertaining to see, you know, some suited performances when teams might not be tapered yet in the season and, you know, see a lot of fast swimming.
Yeah, Griffin, I really agree. I think the whole lineup strategy element of this meet really brings some excitement to the format that we don't typically see with a lot of dual meets or meets of this level across any level of the NCAA. So I think this is just something that is kind of unique and very special and fun to tune into.
I absolutely agree. And I mean, shout out to you, Chicago, for hosting this meet. They won both sides of the coin. They won the women's and the men's. But I'll tell you what, the men's side of the meet was extremely close. We've got, listen, disclaimer here, it is going to take us an hour and a half of Anchor Lake content to cover every single fast swim that went down at this meet. So please, if you're interested, check the results yourself. But with that being said, let's talk about some of the absolutely outlandish swims that went down. And on the women's side, we've got to start with Alexandra Turvey for Pomona Pitzer. I mean, 23.5 in the 50 freestyle, 50.9 in the 100 freestyle, 55.27 in the 100 fly. I mean, that's all I got to say.
We talked about her last week, and here she comes yet again swinging. I mean, wow. This is just phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we do have to understand that these are suited up times coming from this meet, but I mean, nonetheless, still extremely impressive, especially considering they were likely not rested significantly as we have mid-season meets coming up in the next few weeks. But I mean, across the board, just some crazy fast times being thrown down here.
Absolutely. And let's talk about Neely Burns, shall we?
Yeah, posting 3 of the top times in the country this week. And listen, in the 100 breast, we saw something pretty interesting happen. She was the A flight swimmer for Trinity in the 100 breast, ended up taking 2nd overall, and her teammate placed 9th while posting the top time in the country. That is her teammate Kyla Foxhoven. So shout out Kyla Foxhoven for making things interesting in the strategy element of this meet in the 100 breast.
Absolutely. And we also got to talk about Karen Zal from UChicago. I mean, 150.33 in the 200 freestyle. She's got to be happy with that. Probably a little upset that she didn't get her hand on the wall in a third of a second faster. But, hey, absolutely electric swim. And, there's nothing else to say. I think it's going to be very, very fun to watch all of these teams that were out this meet in, 2 weeks or so when they approach their midseason meet and really, really rest up and get into it.
No, I have to agree. I mean, for starters, the D3 Shootout already is just a very, very competitive meet. I mean, you've got all these schools here competing. Energy levels must have been very high, but they still pulled it off very, very phenomenally. Definitely excited to see what they have up their sleeves come mid-season when everyone's tapered and ready to go. This is just a great way to see where everyone's at, and boy.
Yeah, no, for sure. And on the men's side, Chicago took it, but we would be remiss as to not mention Pomona Pitzer. I mean, absolutely down to the wire.
And yeah, Jaden, you talk about that close second performance from Pomona Pitzer. If we're talking about them, we have to mention Larry Yu, who, I mean, this is a guy who was 426 in the 500 last year, 352 in the 400 IM, coming back with some great performances early in the season. 355 in the 4 IM, 148 in the 2 IM, 201 in the 200 breast, making him the high point scorer of the meet on the men's side. I mean, just excellent swims here, this early in the season. What do we think about, Larry Yu's season outlook and what he's going to be looking like come March?
He's always someone to look out for. The crazy part about this performance right here, you look at this, I challenge you, which one of these swims is the most impressive? I mean, he one after another, and all 3 were just unbelievable.
Yeah. You can't tell at all. But I will say this, right? I mean, couple weeks ago, you said, hey, I think Crow Thorson is going to break 350 in the 4IM at this coming March, but he's also going to get first. I think Larry, you might have heard what you said and said, you know what, I gotta spice up Griffin's take here and make things a little more interesting for us. So I'm really excited to see where he's going to go with this 4IM.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Larry's definitely looking to redeem himself. As somebody who pays attention to the D3 scene, as I recall last year, he was 352 in prelims, and the 4IM qualified first. He had one of those swims at night where you slip up a little bit, fell back to that bottom of that A final. But if he can reproduce a 352 in prelims this year and build off of that in finals, I certainly think that he could be, the guy that we can look for to win the 4IM this year. So I completely agree with you, Peter.
Yeah, and that 352 is looking more and more likely with swims like this in the first weekend of November.
And yeah, obviously with a great performance from Larry, he almost carried Pomona Pitzer to a win in this meet, but Chicago ended up taking the overall scores by just 5 points. And great swims from Garrett Clayson this weekend. I mean, Josh, you and I were talking about this just earlier, posted several top times in the country. What do we think of Garrett's swims this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, the 149 2IM is extremely impressive. I mean, to be under that 150 mark in a 200 IM this early in the year is just incredible. I mean, we don't see it that often, even though, these are suited times. That's still a very impressive swim, not having any rest to come off of. I mean, we can expect to see a ton out of him in 2 weeks, in a few weeks, when mid-season meets come around and we're rested up.
You talk about getting under that 150 mark. How about almost getting under 55 in the 100 breaststroke? I mean, come on now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who swam absolutely fantastic. Lights out at NCAA's last year. You're defending 200 IM national champion. So, am I surprised to see him go 149 this early in the season? Certainly not. But it's definitely still something that we should talk about. He's definitely still on our radar for getting first. He's entering his 5th year at U Chicago. This is a guy who has definitely been through the D3 process. More than once. He knows how to get ready, get tapered for those end of season meets. And like we say on here so many times, the more experience you get, the better you get. So seeing a 149 out of Garrett this early in the season, while it might not have taken first at this meet, certainly is something to build off of as we head to the end of the year.
Yeah, and we got to give a shout out to Alex McCormick too from Wash U. I mean, 146 in the 2 back and 48.4 in the 100 backstroke. You can't really ask for much more out of backstroke swims.
No, for that, you could have told me those were freestyle splits. Wouldn't have batted an eye.
Yeah, no, for sure. And those are both the top times in both the individual 100 and 200 back in the country. And Alex McCormick is looking more and more like a guy that we got to have on this podcast.
Listen, if
there may be a hint at something coming soon. We'll see what happens. But Alex McCormick, we got our eyes on you.
Certainly something to keep an ear out for. Listen. Like I said, the D3 Shootout was an absolutely ridiculous meet to watch this week. We did not do it justice at all, and there were so many other fast swimmers out there, but really just got to give a shout out to each one of those teams there. A lot of great D3 teams that showed up and showed out and swam very, very well.
Couldn't agree more. Do check out that meet on your own time. Highly recommend it. Very fascinating swims.
Yeah, and like we said, absolutely doing great things for Division III. I mean, first of all, the name in of itself is just great. I love the D3 Shootout. I love the format. I love, the element of strategicness that's introduced into the meet. It's something to definitely keep an eye out for. I just want to see more teams introduce more meets like this. It's definitely a good way to get some eyes on the Division III swimming scene. So we're looking forward to seeing more. And shout out to U Chicago once again for putting on a great meet, great format.
Let's get a next year. Let's get a D3 Shootout sponsored by Anchor Leg. What do we think, gentlemen?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Oh, yeah. The Anchor Leg Division III Shootout.
Food for thought for the listeners. Let's move on to the next meet.
All right, on to the next meet where the Denison Big Red took on the Kenyon Owls in a great meet where the men's score came down to a score of 151 to 147. I mean, this has to be one of the closest meets we've seen all year, much less in this big of a rivalry. I mean, Josh, this has to be one of the most exciting meets of the year so far.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you come down and look at the individual events, you can see that it really came down to all the second place and third place finishes where on the men's side, the Denison men racked up 14 second place finishes and 10 third place finishes to make up that gap with Kenyon winning 12 of the events available. It's just incredible to see the depth Denison bring. On both the men's and women's side, as we'll get to later. It just really goes to show what the home pool advantage can bring you in a format like this. And it just leads to more and more exciting meets.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, more exciting meets on the women's side. We saw a final score of 167 to 133, which, might look like it was on the verge of a blowout, but, you'd be surprised if I told you that, the first place victories were actually split between Denison and Kenyon. But, like we said, Denison brought that depth on the women's side, even though it was an 8-8 first place split. Those seconds and thirds ultimately proved to be the difference for the Big Red women.
Yep, and just to bring some attention to some top performers, on the women's side we have Bengisu Kamaz, apologies for the pronunciation, coming away with the high point, going 457.5 in the 500 free and 152.3 in the 200 free, both good for first place, as well as contributing to the winning 400 free relay. I mean, guys, sub 5 minute 500 free, are we kidding?
I'm glad I didn't swim 500 yesterday, so that I can't be guilty of losing, because that definitely could have happened. Let's be honest, that was just a ridiculous swim, and shout out to her.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of a blue chip recruit for the Owls this year. I mean, coming out of Istanbul, Turkey, we expected Kamaz to make an immediate contribution to the Owls, but as somebody who hasn't swam in the short course yards format, I'm not sure that any of us on the podcast could have predicted it would be this immediate of a contribution. I mean, posting the third fastest 500 free in Division III, and let's not forget the top 2 times that are ahead of her are both swimmers who were in tech suits. So doing this in a dual meet format, obviously she swam the 200 free beforehand, certainly makes me think that she's one to watch in this individual 500 come March and February this year, when we're looking to win conference and NCAA titles.
Yeah, just to piggyback off what you said, I mean, to be able to come from a different format and immediately adapt so expertly into this short course yards is very, very impressive on its own, and that just adds to the impressiveness of this sub 5 minutes from this 500.
Yeah, absolutely. And 2 more notable performers we can't go without mentioning were Gwen Eisenbeis, going 23.96 in the 50 free. I mean, breaking that 24 barrier is extremely impressive. Good for 7th in Division III this year, as well as Kaylee Wukic going 56.72 in the 100 back, which was good for 7th in D3 as well. I mean, those are just some incredible swims and big contributions.
Yeah, we mentioned Gwen Eisenbeis hitting in that 24 low mark a couple weeks ago when we covered another one of the Kenyon meets, and so for her to get under the 24-second mark is just awesome this early in the season. And I would certainly expect her to really get down into the mid to low 23-second marks, which would be a huge drop for her. So shout out to the Kenyon women. It looks like they're really rounding into form as we hit November here.
Yeah, and on the men's side, we'll talk about some of the top performers here. We got Aleska Doric from Kenyon coming away with the high point, bringing in first place in the 50 free and the 100 free, as well as contributing to 2 relay wins in the 2 medley and 4 free relay. Posting some incredible times in these sprints, the 6th fastest and 9th fastest times in D3, with a 20.61 and a 45.94. I mean, these are just some incredible early season unsuited times. What do we think of this?
Yeah, I mean, great times for sure. From the 50 free perspective, we talked about Emil going 20.5 last weekend. Doric almost topped that as one of the fastest unsuited times in the country this year. 45.9, always very, very impressive to crack that 46 barrier, period, much less in a dual meet. The Kenyon sprint group really, really, really looks pretty strong this early in the year. Always making noise on those sprint relays, the Owls are. And, this is a team that won 8 events last year at NCAAs. They will always overwhelm you with their depth. And, guys like Aleska Doric stepping up this early in the season and contributing is, a great sign for the Owls.
Yeah, and I just want to take a little note on the 100 free. He did take that out in a 22.5, so we can look to see a lot of improvement off that, seeing the front half speed not quite being there in the 100. We could expect him to definitely taper down into the low 44s range.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, also when we look at the 100 freestyle, you always see, guys that go out and dual meets and post 45-second 100 freestyle swims with 21 front hundreds. But the guys that are really going to be the ones that are going to taper down well are the ones that split it exactly like Aleska did, going 22 and then 23 low, coming home to post that 45. I mean, if you've got the back end speed when you're not tapered, when that front end speed gets clicking, when you're suited, shaved, rested, that's when you see guys that go 44s and 43s in the Division III pool. So, I certainly would expect more of the same from Aleska going forward. And, like we said, he's got the speed. We could see it in his 50. So once he gets rested and I would look out for 44 second 100 free.
Oh, absolutely. That back end speed ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and just some other contributors on the Denison side were Christian McIntyre winning the 500 with a time of 4:39.84, good for the 13th best in Division III. Lucas Conrad's winning the 1,000 in a time of 9:41.94, which was good for 8th in Division III, and Liam Nelson winning the 100 breast in a time of 56.37, which was good for 10th in Division III this year. So these are just some fast times all around. Huge contributions coming from Denison that helped make the score so close. You know, the 4-point difference, it came down to every single swim, who can get your hand on the wall. And, you know, just something I'd like to take a note of, being a 400 IMer myself, just going in and looking at the results, we saw some incredible in-season dual meet times with 4 guys getting under that 410 mark, which is just incredible for a dual meet. We saw 2 404s out of the Kenyon guys and a 406 and a 409 out of 2 of the Denison guys. And while none of these times did crack the top 10 in Division III, we do need to keep in mind that a lot of the times we saw at this meet were not in the top 10, and that's because this was a dual meet. This was not one of our DIII Shootouts, or as I'll bring up later, the Emory Invitational, where people were suited up. So we can expect both of these teams on the men's and women's sides to stack up nicely against these suited times come mid-season.
Yeah, for sure, Josh. I think that's always important to keep in mind when we look at these dual meets. Is, you know, the people that are really going these fast times in season and dual meets are definitely people to watch to really just break onto the scene. Especially, you know, some of these freshmen. You know, some people like K-Maz, who, you know, might be international recruits that we haven't seen adapt to the short course yards format yet. Yeah, just keeping your eye on these dual meets where we can really see some breakout swims from some names that we haven't seen before are definitely people that we really need to keep a close eye on moving forward.
If you're watching this video, you might have noticed the camera quality took a little bit of a nosedive. We had some technical difficulties with the camera, but we're back on an Apple iPhone. That's how dedicated we are to bringing you the D3 swimming news. And Peter's about to take it away with some top swims.
Yep, so pick up where we left off, the Emory Invitational, as we were talking about earlier, a lot of suited up times here. Very, very fast swimming. Just to break it down, Emory obviously taking the win in the men and women's sides, you know, showing that they're the dominant Division III team once again, but Wingate picking up second in both sides, and Georgia Southern getting third on the men's side, Carson Newman getting fourth on the men's side and third on the women's side. So, you know, to hop right into the women's top performers, we have Penelope Helm with a 24.00 and a 24.13 relay leadoff in the 50 free. That gives her the second in individual 50 free and 8th overall in Division III. She also put up a 52.05, a 51.08, and a 51.22 relay splits in the 100 free, the 52 being her individual swim from a flat start. I mean, and if you thought that her sprinting ability was all that she had, wait till you hear this, all right? A 152.04 200 free, getting second at the meet, third overall NCAA, and a 456.51 500 freestyle, first in the meet, second overall in Division III. I mean, what else are you gonna do? The 1,000, the mile? I mean, where does this end?
The 2 back, 4 IM. Listen, when you were given those rundowns of those times, you know, started off, wow, sounds like an excellent sprinter. You said, oh, we've got more for you. I thought, wow, an excellent sprinter, maybe branch out in some longer events. After you finish that, I'm thinking, is this a distance swimmer that also is good at sprinting? I don't even know. This broke my brain.
It really does. This is just some mind-boggling range we have here coming from Penelope. What else do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely some great swims. Certainly looks like she's got the aerobic base to move up to the 500 and the speed to go down to the 1500. I'd say that bodes pretty well for her 200, which, as we mentioned, is third in the NCAA. So look for her to make some noise in the 200 and 500 at the end of the season this year.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to point out, like, not only are these swims like just crazy fast, but the fact that she did the 100 free 3 times at this meet so consistently, I mean, that is just wild to me. I can hardly, like, distance events are usually more consistent. I can hardly put up the same times week after week, but to do this 3 times in the same meet, that's crazy. Moving on, let's give up some other shout outs to our women performers. We have Megan Jungers putting up a 55.4 relay leadoff in the 100 back. That is first in Division III. Crazy fast speeds. Once again, if you told me that was a freestyle split, wouldn't have batted an eye, right? Nina Azirovich putting up a 150.77 in the 200 free, beating Penelope earlier. that is first for the meet, and that's a Division II B cut right there.
Absolutely, Peter. Loving to shout out our D2 swimmers here. Shout out to Emory for bringing some D2 competition out to this meet, and picking up a B cut in any division, much less the D2, where we see those B cuts get a little bit harder than they are in D3, going 150 early in the season. Great times. Shout out to Nina for putting up a great swim there.
Yeah, no, I'm sure Nina was really itching to try and break that 150 mark right there. I think she can get it done. I mean, this early in the season, already getting so close. Definitely, a very reasonable goal. All right. And now, let's go ahead and move on to our men's top performers. Harrison Thorson, otherwise known as McKee Thorson, could not be outdone by his older brother here, putting up the high point on the men's side of this meet, going 48.69 to the 100 fly, a 148.87 200 fly. That's fourth. Both of those events are fourth in Division III so far. A 150.03, tying with Crow Thorson the 200 IM, getting them both the fourth fastest time in Division III this year, and a 4:03.50 400 IM, getting third at the meet, being edged out sadly by Crow and my boy Zach Zhao. I see what you're doing there with a 4:01. Crazy swims right there. I mean, let's talk about McKee. He just came in, and this is what he's doing right now. I mean, wow, he is setting the bar high for the freshmen this year.
Yeah, certainly. And, with the freshman class, it's always a feast or famine, right? You either see guys roll in coming off of great club swimming training, putting up great times on the back of a long course summer that they've put up. And, clearly the Emory training translated well for his brother Crow, and it's doing the same for McKee here. He's doing fantastically this year, and I just can't wait to see how he does going forward.
Yeah, and what a cool story, them actually tying in that IM.
The genes, man. I mean, wow. Apples and fall off the tree, and they fell in the same spot.
Yeah. No kidding. And I mean, Peter, you gotta talk about the other guys that just went crazy.
Oh yeah, no. Let's go on. Jake Meyer being Jake Meyer, throwing up a 53.5 100 breast. That is number one in Division III, and a 159.17. Not only cracking the 2-minute mark, but just completely shattering it in the 200 breaststroke. Once again, the fastest time in Division III, the only person to crack 2 minutes so far. Wow. Is this really breaststroke? Can someone give me some footage here and tell me if he actually was swimming breaststroke in these events?
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, we talked about Larry Yu earlier with that 2:01.2 breast. That was unbelievable. And this guy getting not only under 2 minutes, but well under 2 minutes, almost into 158 territory. I mean, what do we see him going at the end of the year this year, gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, he was 52 and 156 last year. I mean, certainly appears to be running into great shape early in the season. Expect him to look to defend his title in the 100 breast. And with Jason Hamilton gone in the 200 breast, certainly he looks like that guy that's going to step up and fill that first place position for Emory.
Mm-hmm. With all that being said, though, we come right back into Crow Thorson, winning the 400 IM with a 3:56.38. Completely obliterated the competition by 5 seconds. I mean, wow, that's second overall Division III. Right behind Larry Yu, hot on his heels. I mean, these two look like they're really going to be competing for this 4 IM and come NCAA, as we said earlier. Very excited to see where he's going to go.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
What else we got to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can segue these two meets right into our top times of the year this year. Let's note that a top time was set in almost every single event on both the men's and women's side this week. So shout out to the entirety of D3 for putting up some fast swims. We're going to throw it over to Jaden to highlight some of the top swims of these past 2 weeks.
Yeah, oh my goodness. I mean, where do I even begin? New top times being set in the 50, the 100, the 200. I mean, David Lloyd coming out with a 20.2. Unbelievable. Jonathan Tang from UChicago, 45.4. And Alex Pollock from Emory sneaking in under the 140 mark in the 2 freestyle. I mean, we're talking about the short stuff. Let's get into a little bit longer. Our very own Peter Mang. Peter, tell them what you did.
I was racing against Rochester this weekend, and I said, you know what, I need to put up a good time going into mid-season 2 weeks from now, and I put up a 9:29.61 in the 1,000. Thank you for letting me say that.
Yeah, that's good for number one in D3.
Keep in mind, guys, unsuited Peter Mang.
Unsuited Peter Mang. Josh, let them know what was going on in the strokes.
Yeah, so we've got a new 50-back relay leadoff with a 22.17 from Adam Braunschweig of Emory, a 48.4 in the 100-back out of Alex McCormick, and a 146.06 out of Alex McCormick at the shootout. Shout out, Alex. Looking to have you on the podcast, man. And then, of course, Jake Meyer posted top times in the 100 and 200 breast, as we just said. And Julian Kamey of Calvin posting a 47.97 in the 100 fly. Jaden, you want to tell them a little bit about the IMs?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Garrett Clayson. He snuck in on that 100 IM, and the interesting relay setup they had went 49.86 in the 100 IM. And let's talk about Derek Moss. I mean, 148.1 in the 2 IM. And
I didn't say he was unsuited at that time,
yeah,
too.
and we're familiar with Larry Yu's game in the 4 IM. I mean, we give you guys these updates on the top times in D3, and just based on how much we're, that segment is typically pretty short. Hey, this guy jumped here, this guy jumped here. No, there was a complete almost reversal of the top times this week, and that's just exciting. It's going to get more exciting as the season goes on.
As these midseason meets come in, I mean, you can be sure to expect these times to get just washed over by new ones. This is exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on to the women's top times, we saw new top times posted in the 100 and 200 free, both at the DIII Shootout, where Alex Turvey posted a 50.9 the 100 free, and Karen Zhao of U Chicago posted a 150.3 in the 200. Megan Jungers of Emory took back the 50 and 100 back, top position in the country, as we mentioned, with a 25.8 and a 55.4. Sarah Krause of Hope posted the top 200 back in the country at the DIII Shootout as well. Neely Burns of Trinity posted the top time in 3 different events in the 200 breast, 200 IM, and 400 IM. Her teammate Kyla Foxhoven of Trinity posted the top 100 breast time in the D3 Shootout. Alex Turvey was back at it again, posting another top time in the 100 fly at the D3 Shootout. Alicia Kelly was a 202.56 in the 200 fly for the top time in the country. And Greta Gidley of Hope, a transfer from Michigan, posted the top time in the 100 IM on that mixed 100 IM relay, as we talked about, going 56.5. So impressive stuff there from Greta. Great times across the board. We're looking to see even more top times on the women's side posted as we round into the midseason meets next couple weeks.
Yep, so I think it's about time for our favorite segment on this podcast. We're going to get into a couple little hot takes here. So does anybody want to volunteer going first?
One sec. Sorry. So, yeah, Cooper Costello of U Chicago, a freshman, one of those guys that we said is riding the wave of having some great training coming in from his club program. It's a guy who's got great pedigree in the 200 fly and long course. Rounding into shape early, posting a 148 in the 200 fly, which is right around what it took to qualify for NCAA's last year. And listen, we talk about how people get better with experience in D3. I'm going to say on a limb here that the unexperienced rookie comes in and qualifies for the NCAA championship in the 2 fly for Chicago. I mean, he's just looking about as good as you could possibly ask him to this early in the season. I wouldn't be surprised if he's pushing into that mid-140s range in the 2 fly, qualified for the NCAA championship in March.
Yeah, I mean, is it that hot, though, if he's got a time right now that would have qualified? He's definitely going to have a good second half of the season, but I could see him taking that down. He's shown very, very early that he's got a lot of talent and definitely someone to watch at the D3 stage.
Yeah, I mean, if he's already there, I don't see why not. I mean, as freshmen, I feel like, yes, like you'd have less experience, but I feel like freshmen come into college and they're ready to give it their all towards swimming, right? I mean, this is, from my personal experience, freshman year is probably the year where I probably put in the most effort into swimming, like whether or not that be like, very optimal or not. There's some things I obviously would like to change, but that's when effort levels are high, motivation is high. I think if he continues through, this is a very, very likely thing.
Yeah, so I think on to our next take. I think, we talked about Neely Burns a little bit earlier, posting the top time in the 200 breast in D3 so far this year. I mean, I think, can we go as far as to say she's a contender for an individual title at NCAA's this year? I mean, she's coming in, guns a-blazing, throwing out some crazy fast times. I mean, just look at her results from over the summer, going several personal bests at Futures Championships this past July. I mean, I think we can expect to see a lot out of her this year.
Yeah, if those summer times are any indication of what's about to go down this year, I don't think that's a hot take at all. I really do see that happening. And listen, can I hit you with my hot take? Listen,
oh, yeah.
They suffered a little bit of losses this year, but I see Calvin getting top 10 again. I mean, what do we think, boys?
Yeah, certainly. And we talk about Noah Holstich, who posted a blazing 1948 in the 50 last year to take the NCAA crown. And you might be thinking, with losing a gold medal there, how in the world are they going to come back? Let me tell you, depth. That's how they're going to do it. At the Calvin Quad meet this weekend, legends say they were not suited up. The Calvin Relay posted top time in the country with all 4 of their guys under 21 seconds in the 50 free going 1:22.52. And that's not even discounting Julian Kamey, who was not on this relay, posting a 47 in the individual 100 fly. I just think that the Calvin boys are in great shape. That sprint group always does great things for them, and I think that they're going to be top 10 again this year.
Yeah, now we lose our minds when one person goes under 21. I mean, they just get into perspective that 4 of these boys are all going under 21 and putting together a relay. Phenomenal stuff. Mind-blowing. Right?
Yeah, and let's talk about it. Calvin's second place relay this weekend, they were 1:25.44. For reference, at the Case Western versus Rochester meet, 1:25.39 won the overall event. So that is our 4 best swimmers going against their 5 through 8 best sprinters. It's a very close race. So, they've got a lot of depth in that sprint group. And I just think that they're going to, sort of carry that momentum into a great spring, and they're going to do great things in NCAAs this year.
100%. Well, yeah, I think that wraps up the podcast this week. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate you working with us through the little bit of changes in what you may be seeing on your screen. But no, all jokes aside, we appreciate you. Please send us some DMs with anything you would like us to highlight. We really do want this to be something where we engage with and promote the listeners' content as well as the things that we find from our own journalism.
Yeah, and if you haven't already, please tune into our interview with Mr. Christian Lanuza of Carnegie Mellon last week. It was a fantastic conversation. It was lovely to have him on. A lot of insights from him. I think a lot of people would get a lot from. So please check that out if you haven't.
Yeah, and I think on that note, that'll wrap up week 4 of the Anchor Leg podcast. We'll see you all next week. Thanks as always for tuning in.